Okay, according to my clock, we're past the hour, so I think we'll begin. And just by way of introduction, my name is Dave Van Alstyne. I'm the chair of the Energy and Infrastructure sector of Sustainable Aurelia. And on the screen at this moment, we're displaying a letter from Stan Matheson, who's the president of Sustainable Aurelia, who bids you welcome. And he wanted to make sure that everybody enjoys the videos, and hopefully we do a good job of this. As far as the webinar series goes, this is only the second one in a series. So if you go to the Sustainable Aurelia website, and it's easy to find, just type in Sustainable Aurelia, you'll see other webinars in the series, and all very good and interesting topics. Tonight's topic, we're going to be talking about electric vehicles, and with a person who's an expert within this category, this field. But before we do that, some housekeeping things that we have to do. I'm going to stop sharing this at the moment so that you can see us. As far as the housekeeping goes, we would like to acknowledge the fact that we are on First Nations lands, and just bear with me, I'll find that. There's a preamble. Okay, we acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe peoples. I wish to recognize the long history of First Nations and Métis people in Ontario and show respect to them today. I would also like to specifically acknowledge the neighboring communities of the Chippewas of Georgian Island, the Chippewas of Ram First Nation, and the Bosley First Nation. Thank you. Now tonight, we have, like I said, Ken Bokor. Now, Ken is the creator, producer, and host of a YouTube channel called the EV Revolution Show. He does present a mix of news styles reporting, electric vehicle reviews, as well as coverage of related events. His channel has over 13,000 subscribers with more than 1.1 million views. And he does participate in many other volunteer community outreach programs, including talks about EVs. So this particular talk is nothing new. As far as he's concerned, he does it quite often, and he does it really well. He works with his local community on facets of their climate change community action plan, and he's a resident of Caledon, so he's coming to us by way of technology tonight. And that's the one good thing about the current times we're in. It's certainly forcing us to learn how to use the technology to its fullest. He does work full-time in IT solutions, so I kind of defer to him if there's any issues with what we're trying to do tonight. Hopefully everything goes smoothly. I'm going to turn it over to him, but before I do that, I'd like to remind everyone out there that if you do have to have your video and audio turned on, please turn it off. I don't think you will, but if you do, please do that, and ask your questions through the chat function. We'll be monitoring the chat function, and we'll be answering those questions at the end of Ken's presentation. When it comes to the questions, feel free to add them as Ken is speaking, because there's no way of going back if you can't remember what it was that you wanted to ask. So do it as the idea or the question comes up in your mind. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Ken, and he'll be able to answer all those questions at the end of his talk. Thank you. Ken, it's all yours.
Well, thanks very much for inviting me and for Aurelia Sustainability to have me as part of one of the guest speakers. I appreciate it. It's an honor, and thanks to everybody who's taken the time, a lot of the residents, to watch this presentation. Yes, there is a chat function for questions, and there's also a poll that I put up there. And Dave, if you can just mute your mic, because I'm getting a little bit of chatter there, that would be great. There's a poll there as well if you haven't clicked on that, just to see if you've got an EV or a plug-in hybrid. There's also a handout, which I'll talk about at the end a little bit. I'll give you a little bit of reference to that. So let me get into my presentation. I'm going to share the screen. Just give me a sec here. And hopefully you can see it. And off we go. If you can't see it, Dave, you can jump in on your mic, but if I don't hear from you, I'll take that to mean that everything's working so far. So yes, this is EV 101, or the electric vehicle revolution, as I like to call it. And thanks very much for that gracious introduction. My name is Kenneth Bokor, and I have a lot of different things that I do in my life beyond work, in volunteer work, and two of them are with the Electric Vehicle Society. I'm a chapter lead. Dave is also a member of the society as well as part of the executive. And as he mentioned, I do on the side a YouTube show called the EV Revolution Show. I do it for the cause of promoting EVs. It's something that it's not a business or anything like that for me, but I'm very passionate about supporting the cause and promoting and having talks like this. So appreciate everybody taking the time out. Let me start with a little historical reference on EVs. A lot of people may not know that they're not new. That they have been around quite a long time. In fact, they've been around longer than internal combustion vehicles have. You'll hear me use the term EVs and ICVs, internal combustion engine vehicles. I'll just let you know that at the beginning. So if I do use those terms, EVs are electric vehicles, just so you all understand. But you can see by these pictures that they've been around since the mid-1800s. In fact, the lower left portion is an interesting individual, which a lot of us will know, or somebody that we've heard of, is Thomas Edison. And what's interesting about that photo is that he was involved in building and producing a race, or a 1,000-mile endurance run. Now, this is back in the mid-1800s, where technology was very rudimentary from a battery and an energy storage capability. So if they could do 1,000 miles then, boy, we can certainly do a lot more today, and I'll tell you all about that. So something interesting. Also, there's a very famous electric vehicle that's actually been out. It's been out and about, I'll use the term, since the 1970 decades. If anybody knows what that could be, I'll show you. It's the lunar rover that was used on the Apollo missions. Again, there's no oxygen on the moon, so they needed a vehicle to get around, and electricity was the way to do. They could charge it up, I believe, via some solar panels through the capsule and use it. And it's still sitting there, probably looking as pristine as it does in this picture back from the mid-1970s. So, you know, EVs are nothing new. Now, what really is an electric car? And I see by the poll that a lot of people, pretty well the majority of people that have responded, don't have an electric car or a plug-in hybrid today, and I'll explain a little bit more about those as I go through the presentation. But simply put, an electric car or electric vehicle really is just an automobile that's propelled by electricity, by using electric motors, as opposed to burning fossil fuels or gasoline of some form. It could be unleaded, it could be diesel. Could be different kinds of gasolines, and it's using electrical energy that's stored in rechargeable batteries. So similar batteries that you find in laptop computers, and of course chemistries that we use in cell phones and in a lot of modern technology today. And that's really what gets the vehicle moving. Now, electric motors give electric cars a couple of really great benefits. One of them is instant torque. So for a lot of people that understand auto vehicles and horsepower and torque, you know that torque is really important, because that's actually what gets you going from the line. That gets you from the stop position up to speed relatively quickly. And then horsepower actually carries you into some higher end as the motor spins up and gets to an RPM level. And you get this instant torque right away in electric cars. So they have strong and very smooth linear acceleration as well. Now, one of the early attempts at a mass market vehicle, a lot of viewers and listeners on today's webcast may recognize this vehicle as General Motors EV1, which is one of the first attempts at it. It was a great vehicle. It was in a very limited market. Ran only for a few years till GM pulled the plug and ended up crushing pretty well all of them out there. There are a few still around that have been donated to universities or to museums, but it was unfortunate, because had GM continued with that program, they may truly be an EV leader today. I wanted to just briefly talk a little bit about the difference between some of the terms that you may hear when you're looking at automobiles. Everybody knows and understands the conventional automobile. It's been around for 100 years or more. It runs on gas. It emits greenhouse gas emissions, many different types of emissions. There's also the hybrid, and hybrids became popular into the 90s, into the 2000s, and even into the 2010 decades, and they're still around today. One of the things I just wanted to point out about a hybrid is that they have very small batteries. I'm not sure if you can see my mouse pointer or not, but they have very small batteries. They're primarily still running on a gasoline engine. The batteries are there that capture energy from regenerative braking, but there's no plug to recharge that battery in, so it's a very small battery. They typically, what they do is they help with stop and start capability. So when you stop the car, the engine shuts off. When you want to go again, the battery propels the car till maybe 10 or 15 kilometers an hour, whatever. Then the engine starts up and continues going. And then sometimes they can add a bit of acceleration boost on the highway when you need to pass somebody. They have just a very minor amount of stored energy. But the key takeaway to that is that they're not that efficient when it comes to lowering greenhouse gas emissions. The engine is still used predominantly a lot of the times in hybrids. So what the industry has done, and hybrids came out really to get better MPG ratings and miles per kilometer and all that stuff, because the governments were forcing those mandates, particularly through California and through the CARB states, and then other mandates that came up in the US and into Canada. So they came up with plug-in hybrids, and plug-in hybrids have a larger battery, but they still have an engine. But typically here, the engine, depending on the size of the battery, the engine most of the time acts as a generator to send charge to the battery. So what you can do in a plug-in hybrid is you can plug it into your wall outlet or to another type of charger, and then you can charge that battery pack up to a certain level where you can run in battery only mode. So you're not using the engine at all. Thereby, you're drastically lowering your greenhouse gas or your emissions. But there is still an engine, and if you needed that some forgiveness, let's say the battery, you weren't really confident of going all electric, you needed some range, the engine would kick in and either work to propel the car in some cases. Sometimes they're hybrid, they're kind of parallel systems. And in series, so there's different elements to do that. But the engine will still run at some point in time if you need it to. But depending on the size of the battery, like the Chevy Volt that isn't around anymore, you could go 80, 90 kilometers in the summertime on that battery only, thereby probably doing a lot of your daily chores without even using a drop of fuel. So there are some good options out there. And then all electric is really what's coming to fruition now. We've seen a tremendous amount of growth in that industry over the last 5 to 10 years, and they are truly zero emission vehicles because they run only on battery, on electric only. And here are some examples. This chart is a little outdated. There are tons more now that are out there. So hopefully that adds a little clarity to what the differences are in these vehicles. Now, where I focus my show and my efforts, and the Electric Vehicle Society as well, where we do our efforts, is in the all-electric and the plug-in hybrid stuff. Anything that has a plug, you'll hear me use the term plug-in, that's what I mean, anything that has a plug that you would plug into a wall. Now, one of the first really truly mass market EVs that came about was in around 2010 when Nissan launched the Leaf. Here's a picture of it. And the reason I say really one of the first mass market, there were some other all-electric vehicles out there, very, very small number, but they went to a global approach. So they were shipping these vehicles around the world into dozens of countries, and it was really their attempt to kind of legitimize the electrified automobile industry. And they did quite well for that. Now, again, it was a very small part of their overall automotive lineup. Nissan and the group of companies is a big company, so they have a lot of other products to sell. But it was nice to see them really get into that. And I know there are tons of Leaf people that own the Leaf that are out there that love the vehicle. But also at that time, there was another company called Tesla, and I think pretty well everybody knows and has heard of Tesla. They started up in 2009, starting with and around that time, a little bit earlier, building the Tesla Roadster. And what they did is they wanted to build a limited number of vehicles that were all electric to showcase what the power that you can get from all electric vehicles, and that they are a very capable technology, because that's really something that people weren't that sure of. How long would they last? Do they break easy? Can you go? What about winter? What about all this other stuff? So Tesla was out there to prove that the technology is sound, and they developed a lot of in-house technology, and they took that into a less expensive vehicle, into the Model S. And what that did is that gave them more revenue so that they could put that back into the company to build another fairly expensive vehicle, but not as much as the Roadster, which is the Model X, which is their SUV. So they really built the company in the on these three cars, mainly the S and the X, over the last decade, and that's what they were doing. Now, one of the things that they developed is this platform, and you may have heard the term skateboard platform, and really it's a visual adaptation of what that platform is. It's a low platform. You've got your front axle, your rear axle, and the batteries are put between the axles on the floor. Hence, you get that term skateboard. The motors, electric motors, are very small. They're not as big as internal combustion motors, so they would sit either on the axle in the front or on the axle in the back. In this case, it could be an all-wheel drive, so have two motors. But that skateboard design is something that Tesla kind of came up with, and now all the automobile manufacturers use that same terminology when they're describing especially all electric vehicles, because there's a lot of benefits to that platform, and I'll talk about what those benefits are in a bit. Excuse me. And again, EVs are simplified vehicles. From a number of components, they have probably around 2,000 moving parts versus in excess of maybe 10 to 20,000 on an internal combustion vehicle. So there's a lot less components to worry about in an all-electric battery vehicle. Here's just a quick snapshot of what those major components are. You have your battery pack, as I mentioned, low and on the floor of the vehicle between the axles. You have a power control electronics, which is generally an inverter and a charger. All EVs have the charger built into them, so they're able to take charges in various forms and capacities. Then you have an electric drive motor of some sort. And that's basically it. Then you have your frame, your chassis, your interior bits and bots, and all that other stuff. But a lot less stuff to worry about in an electric car. And why does that matter? Well, I'll tell you later on why that matters. Now, one of the other characteristics that EVs bring are some structural characteristics from a safety perspective. Here's a snapshot of a Model 3, one of the Tesla Model 3s, and it provides a rigid structure. A lot of them use mixed components of steel and aluminum and different alloys, and to help with impact protection and very low rollover. And how do they get that low rollover? Is because, as I mentioned, the batteries are in the floor. They're on the floor of the vehicle between the axles, and there's a lot of weight in that battery pack. An average all electric vehicle battery pack can weigh anywhere from 800 to 1,200 pounds. So it's a lot of weight that's down on that floor. But what that does is it provides a low center of gravity for the vehicle, which not only adds to safety, but also adds to really, really good handling characteristics, both in if you're wanting to go track with these things or even in the winter. Now, one of the things I like to bring up from staying on the historical front is kind of the iPhone moment for electric vehicles. And I think a lot of people that are familiar with the iPhone and recognize this picture of Steve Jobs holding the initial iPhone when that was announced in the 2000s decades, that was a critical and a game changer from a technology perspective. Yes, there were some smartphones out there. There were some touchscreen devices. There was something similar to that out there, but most of us had flip phones and different kinds of phones. And this revolutionized because it put the power of applications on your phone. So it wasn't just to make calls and some rudimentary contacts. This put the power of a lot of things that the phone could do. So it was a game changer for the technology, and we've never looked back. Now the smartphone is part of the dictionary, and everybody pretty well has a smartphone or has something similar to a smartphone. They really changed the landscape there. So that kind of happened in the electric vehicle marketplace with the Model 3 announcement that Tesla did on March 31st, 2016. And why do I say that that's an iPhone moment? Because, well, that was a pivotal moment for electric vehicles because it did a couple things. It allowed Tesla to bring a less expensive vehicle to market. They touted it as mass market, but $50,000 Canadian isn't a really cheap mass market price. So, you had to look at that a little bit thinly. But what it did is it excited the marketplace to a point where hundreds of thousands of people started to put reservations on this, and many of these before the vehicle was even seen. In fact, Tesla opened reservations on the morning of March 31st. They did this broadcast in the evening of that day, And by the time they did the broadcast, they already had in this picture well over 130,000 reservations. And that reservation was $1,000 that you had to put down. And that would put your name in a queue for when these cars were going to come out. Now, they were going to come out for another year or so. So this has never really happened in the automotive marketplace. We were used to seeing lineups at the Apple stores when new Apple products came out. That was kind of the norm, but not for automobiles. And this happened. People were lined up around the blocks at Tesla stores throughout the world, not just in North America or in Canada. So it was a big deal, and it created a lot of hype and excitement, and it got a lot of attention and a lot of people looking at the EV landscape. And in fact, they ended up acquiring over 500,000 reservations before they actually started to deliver these vehicles in July of 2017, about a year and a half later. So it was a phenomenal moment. And the only thing that really came close to this moment was, I think, in 1962 or 1963-ish time frame, or somewhere between there and 64, where Ford launched the Mustang, and there was about 60,000 reservations for that, but they weren't necessarily lineups at the store like we saw occur here, people camping out and things like that. So it was definitely a pivotal moment. And what that has done is that have spawned dozens now of all electric vehicles and and even more push for plug-in hybrid vehicles because of the awakening in this marketplace, that the other automobile manufacturers realized, hey, there is a marketplace. People do want these. There is an audience, and if we build it, we will be able to sell these if we do it right. And this is even kind of before talks of climate change and all this other stuff were out there. But this was really a phenomenal moment that spurred this. So my hat's off to Tesla, and I want to give that recognition to them. So here is just a small snapshot of some of the models that are out there and there's tons more from a global perspective. Now, what I wanted to do quickly is just run through some vehicles that are available here in Ontario for us buyers that you could get that qualify for the zero emission vehicle incentive. This is an incentive by the Canadian federal government, which allows you to get up to $5,000 off the purchase price of an electric vehicle. So I'm going to walk through about a handful of vehicles, 6 or 7 vehicles that qualify for this, and I'll show you some pricing on this as well after that. But this gives you a perspective of some of the options that if you were interested, and I see there's a lot of people in the poll that don't have an EV today, this could give you some good clarity to what's available. So, and these are in alphabetical order. They're not in any ranking that I give them. So BMW came out with the i3 several years ago, and of course it's a great vehicle from a BMW. It's got great engineering. It's got some really funky designs, as you can see, either love it or hate it. And it uses a lot of recyclable materials in the construction, so it's less carbon impact, all that kind of stuff. But here are the specs. And when you're talking about all electric vehicles, the main spec that you'll hear is the size of the battery pack. And this is a 42 kilowatt hour. So that's how much storage that this battery pack can hold, or how much energy. The bigger the number, the larger the range. So that's how to equate that. If it's a 30, 40, 50, 60, the 60 is going to have the longest range, and the 30 is going to have the shortest range. So that's how you can equate those numbers. Here's some range configurations for the i3, some horsepower. Now you'll notice that they're pretty heavy on the torque vector. All these EVs have pretty high torque ratings, and that's to be expected, and because they're all electric. So this is a rear-wheel drive that seats 4. Another great option that just came up this year is from BMW as well, is the Mini Electric Cooper. So they took their newer Mini Electric platform and they electrified it in an all-electric capacity. There is also, I believe, a plug-in hybrid version as well for that. Now, the all-electric has a 32 kilowatt hour battery pack with a range of about 177. Now, the ranges that you're seeing on the screen in this presentation are all EPA rated ranges. So these are North American energy, standard ranges. Typically, you will get more than this, especially in the summertime when the temperatures are nice. In the winter, though, you can lose a lot of range, and you could lose up to 50% of your range in the winter, especially when we get those minus 25, minus 30, minus 40 days of wind chills and very Arctic, all the Arctic blasts that come down that we get. It's not uncommon to get up to 50% range loss. Typically, it's about 30% in the wintertime. That's kind of the average. So take that into consideration when you're looking at EVs, when you're thinking of range for your daily use. Chevrolet's had the Bolt, that's with a B, for a few years now. It's a great vehicle. They just increased the battery pack size for this year and upped the range to hit over 400 kilometer mark. So as you can see now, the bigger the batteries, now we're getting to some really interesting range requirements. And again, very good specs from a horsepower and torque. It's a front-wheel drive, 5-seater hatchback vehicle, very popular here in Canada and does extremely well. Hyundai has come out with the IONIQ. They've had the IONIQ platform for a while, but they did electrify it. They also offer it as a plug-in hybrid and a couple of other models. So they have 4 different choices for it. The all-electric model seen here has a 38 kilowatt-hour battery pack with a range of about 273 kilometers. This was increased for this year. And again, doesn't really matter much of the horsepower. It's the torque that really kind of gets these things going that you want to look at. And front wheel drive, seats 5. And you'll see with EVs, a lot of them do come with a lot of technology that could be extra on a lot of vehicles today, but they tend to come with them. So you have to check each vendor. Now, Hyundai also has the Kona Electric, which is a very popular vehicle. They can't keep a lot of them on the lots. They've been selling so well. Now, again, a good size battery. Look at the range, over 400 kilometers again. This is a compact SUV design, very popular in North America, that whole SUV marketplace. Very impressive get up and go figures, front wheel drive again, and it seats 5, and you have the hatchback, and you have some storage and versatility in this. It's not a big SUV, but it's great for booting around. It sits a little higher, you get the clearance, and it has a lot of great features. Now, Kia also has a couple electrified vehicles. Kia and Hyundai basically are the same companies. They're one of them owns the other. I forget which one is which. So you'll see a very similar in the specs and the platforms that they use. All of their platforms are shared between the model lines. The Niro has a 64 kilowatt, again, just shy of 400 kilometer range. Again, I test drove a lot of these. I've done reviews on a lot of these vehicles, and I was able to get actually better ranges, better distances than what's advertised EPA. So you'll see EPA to be a little conservative in the numbers they give you, but of course that's best case, optimal temperatures, optimal driving configurations, of course. So your mileage is going to vary. Again, very competent get up and go numbers, and this is bigger than the Kona, so it's a little bit more of a compact to almost mid-size SUV. Very comfortable, has a lot of great attributes to it. Then the Soul. So the Soul's been around for a while. It's kind of a funky vehicle. It's got a neat design. You either love it or you hate it. From what I talk to people, they did change the design for the 2020 model year. I like the looks of it. I actually took one of these green ones around for about a week when I tested it back in the spring. Great ranges. Now it comes in Canada in 2 flavors with a just under 40 kilowatt hour battery pack and a 64. Again, those are the respective ranges there. And again, very similar get up and go numbers that you saw on the Niro. Again, just different look. It has different functionality. Lots of versatility in this vehicle as well. You do sit a little higher. You've got a good sized trunk space. Lots of good sized rear seating. So it's a nice vehicle if that is something that you like to look at. Now, Nissan, as I mentioned, came out with the Leaf back in 2010, and they've continued with that model line for a decade now. They came out with a second generation in 2018. This is what it looks like, and it's the same. It looks exactly the same now in 2020 and into 2021. In 2018, they increased it to a 40 kilowatt hour battery pack with a range of about 240 kilometers. But in last year, in 2019, they upped it to, they also gave another option of a 62 kilowatt hour battery pack, putting a range of around the 360 or so, 370 kilometers. And these are the specs, very much get up and go. I owned a 40 kilowatt Nissan Leaf for 2.5 years. At the end, I can share some of my stories about that if you'd like, especially when it comes to costs. I don't have the data handy, but I can tell you what that was. Great vehicle, very versatile. We used it, and I put about 45,000 kilometers on that vehicle. It was fantastic. So an excellent choice if you're looking for an all-around practical, versatile vehicle. Then, of course, I mentioned Tesla and their achievements, and with the launch of the Model 3. The Model 3 has been the #1 selling all-electric vehicle now for 2 years running. That's a global number. They continue to sell lots of these. They're probably going to build their millionth Tesla Model 3 sometime around, I would say, January. Right now, they're into the 800,000s from a VIN perspective. And the way that they're building these, I believe they'll probably hit it in January or maybe February. So that's an astonishing fact to ship 1 million of these in just a couple of years. So it's doing quite well. It has a couple of different battery configurations, as you can see. But the key to Teslas, and yes, they are expensive, but what you get with them is range. And even in the smaller configuration, you get a minimum of 400-kilometer range. And with the larger, you get over 500-kilometer range. And it comes in different configurations with a, as you can see, a single motor, a dual motor all-wheel drive, and a performance spec where they tweak the amount of power in the motors so that you can get more throughput out of them. They come both in a rear-wheel drive and all-wheel drive versions, as I mentioned, in the Seat 5. Now, Tesla is a very technology-driven company, so some people like that minimalistic technology that they offer in the Model 3, and some of them don't. Some of them like multiple, buttons and knobs, and they want the different screens and all that stuff. It's great. The good thing is that hopefully you're seeing that there's a lot of choice out there, and these are just a few of them. The last one on my list is the VW e-Golf. It's been around for a few years as well, and basically what VW did is take the Golf platform and electrify it. So it's not a ground up vehicle per se done. Some of the other manufacturers have done that as well, but it performs extremely well. It's got that Golf handling, the engineering behind the Golf, the sturdiness, the build quality is excellent, and it comes in a nice package of about 200-kilometer range with really enough get up to go, beautiful interior, and at a price point which you'll see coming up, which is very attractive. Now, VW is not shipping them to Canada anymore because we're going to be getting a new product come next year called the ID4, and that's VW's venture into the fully electric landscape. So that'll be exciting. But if you can't find these are a great, great bargain at this point. Now, these are some other notable, and I don't have them all on the list, but these are all of vehicles that you can get in Canada, with the exception of the upper right top vehicle. That's the Mercedes-Benz EQC. That is still not delivering in Canada. It was supposed to deliver last December, but they've been delayed. They have shipped them in Europe, but I'm told by MB that they should be coming early part of next year. But they will be coming, and that's their first foray into that with an SUV. But as you can see, there's a lot of other selections. You've got Jaguar, you've got the Tesla Model S and X, you've got some plug-in hybrids here as well. The Mitsubishi Outlander plug-in hybrid PHEV. That's the best-selling plug-in hybrid, by the way, globally. It's the #1 selling vehicle. They're doing quite well with that from a global perspective. You have the Audi e-tron, which is an all-electric, and then you have some other plug-in hybrids. The Fiat Chrysler, the FCA Pacifica hybrid. It's the only hybrid minivan on the market. It's a great vehicle. I believe you can get probably anywhere from 50 to 60 kilometers on that in all-electric range. Great for running around town, helping to lower greenhouse gas emissions by not burning fuel, yet giving you the minivan capability. And the Honda Clarity is another one that I just recently reviewed. Great vehicle, offering really good options if you're not willing to take the all-electric plunge at this point. So I mentioned pricing. So here's a chart that I put together, and hopefully you can see that it might be kind of small for some folks out there, but it is basically what I keep tabs on the marketplace, and this is basically a listing from the starting MSRP from the lowest down to the highest at the bottom, and everything in green are vehicles that qualify for that $5,000 federal incentive. So you would be able to get the $5,000 off the price of this if you were to buy one of these vehicles in the green. So there's a lots of choice. That's what I really want you to take away. Some of them with, like a Volkswagen e-Golf, you can get out the door probably at around 35,000 or something, which is pretty competitive. EVs do cost more than comparable internal combustion vehicles today. We have not hit cost parity, unfortunately. We are getting there. Battery prices have come down a lot, tenfold since in the decade. And they continue to go down. Automakers are trying to start making more EVs, and that'll all bring the price down for consumers. We expect a cost parity within the next, I would say, 3 to 5 years, maybe 2 to 3 years, depending on what analysts you read. But certainly, I would think by 2025 we'll see it. So we are getting there, but there is a bit of a premium you pay for getting an electric vehicle. A couple of things I wanted to note here is just today, Tesla reduced the price on the Model S vehicles because of Lucid Air's announcement of their vehicle, their entry-level vehicle, so they went and lowered their pricing. That's something that Tesla has the ability. They can change their pricing from one day to the next, and they do that sometimes. It's something that they change things on the fly. But as you can see, you have a myriad of ranges from 150, 170 kilometers, let's say on the low end, to anywhere upwards of 840-kilometer range. Now, it's a $190,000 car, but you can see you've got some pretty compatible ranges here in the 500 kilometer to 400 kilometer range, and these are daily ranges that you can achieve depending on the conditions in your driving. So a lot of good selection. Now, I mentioned that EVs do cost more, but there are some advantages, and one of them is a lower total cost of ownership. Well, how do you get that? Well, one of them, as I just mentioned, is the incentive. So you can get some money off the purchase price. Unfortunately, we don't have the $14,000 provincial incentive that we did 2 years ago. After the Ford government came in, they killed that program. But that would, in conjunction with even the federal one, would have really been a game changer. Would have actually made EVs lower than internal combustion vehicles. But unfortunately, we don't have that program. But there are still some incentives, and in some of the other provinces, they have incentives which can be stacked on the federal ones, like in Quebec and BC. Also, when you look at fuel and versus electricity costs, electricity, even though some people may say it's expensive here in Ontario, it isn't really by comparison. Right now, we're on I believe the entire province is on a fixed electricity delivery rate of 12 cents per kilowatt because of the pandemic right now. But generally, we have things called tiered pricing. So if your electricity costs you less at night than it does during the day, and there's usually 2 or 3 different tiers of pricing depending on your provider. So even at 12 cents, which is typically higher than we normally would pay, I would charge my EV overnight at 6 cents on the normal scheme of things. It's still much cheaper than fuel. And when I mentioned about my Nissan Leaf earlier, I did, as I mentioned, 45,000 kilometers in about 2.5 years. My total cost for fuel, so that's all charging. That's charging at home and charging at external, public, and like malls, and some were free chargers and some I had to pay for. Some were fast chargers. Most of my charging was in at home. My total cost was just under $1,100 Canadian to do 45,000 kilometers. That's, for fuel, that would have cost me probably 4 times more for that kind of mileage in a comparable internal combustion vehicle. So there's lots of savings to be had there. Also, I mentioned the number of parts are less, so that you're lower maintenance costs. There's really not a lot to do in an EV. Brakes, of course, they last a lot longer, usually about double or triple than what they will in a normal internal combustion engine vehicle, because you're using the regenerative braking aspects of the vehicles to slow down in a lot of cases. So it saves wear and tear on the brakes. Now, there was a question I saw in the chat, which I'll answer now because I'm on that slide. But yes, typically we do see lower auto insurance costs. And that is attributed to, as I mentioned, some of the safety earlier, but also because you have lower maintenance costs, you have less number of parts in EV. So typically to fix them, they can cost less. So insurance's pricing is based on a lot of factors, but one of the factors is how much does it cost to fix the vehicle, and how safe is it? Those directly impact insurance rates. And also, I'll show you a little bit more about that in the next slide. And then also home charging. So I was able to home charge. So therefore, I'm able to not spend a lot of money on fueling my vehicle versus having to maybe go to a fast charger all the time or something like that. So home charging is a big benefit if you can warrant that. Now, from safety, and as I mentioned, safety is a huge benefit of EVs. Now, a lot of cars are safe, so don't get me wrong. Volvos and all these other vehicles have 5-star ratings. A lot of them do. That's kind of typical in a lot of the higher premium vehicles today. But EVs typically score well because of that increased structural rigidity, and they have larger front and rear crumple zones. Typically, they don't have that big engine up front that gets pushed in a lot of cases into the occupants, into the interior space. And so they have larger crumple zones to absorb impact energy much more efficiently so that they can become safer. And then they have a lower center of gravity, as I mentioned as well. That increased structural rigidity, it's not just the frame as well. I'm going to replay this slide. It's not just the frame, but also the battery pack. As I mentioned, the battery pack is on the floor, and that's housed in a container of some sort, and that's all bolted to the frame. So you've got 1,000 pounds of weight in this container, in this steel container that's bolted to the frame, that adds to increased structural rigidity, especially for things like side impacts. This is the side pull, which is a very serious impact that can really intrude into the occupant space, and EVs score quite well on those. Typically, a lot of them are 5-star rated. And another advantage is greener. Now, I get this asked of me a lot, saying, well, really, electric cars are not cleaner than gas. We have biofuels, we have all this kind of stuff. Well, that's still false, because when you look at electric cars, especially all electric, they are equivalent to a very high MPG rating if you were to use the math out for that. And they continue to become cleaner as more electricity is generated by renewable sources or clean energy. If we look at Ontario's grid today, we have a very clean. We have no more coal in Ontario. We got rid of the last coal plant several years ago. So in essence, we have very clean energy that's produced, and that adds, because we can charge from that grid, that adds to the cleanliness of the EVs. And even when you look at the entire life cycle of EVs, they do, of course, emit zero emissions on them, all electrics, because there's no internal combustion motor to burn fuel. So they are clean. But when you look at the life cycle, the mining of the raw materials, I get this all the time, the lithium, all this other stuff, the cobalt, there's a lot of this stuff that goes into the batteries, which is changing almost yearly. The chemistries are changing. Companies are moving more away from cobalt now into other better sourced materials. But when you look at that whole life cycle, from the build, the mining and the development of the batteries, and the build of the vehicles, to the operation of the vehicles, to the end of their usable life, which really isn't that, we haven't really hit that yet, because there's a lot of EVs that are still running. I know Dave has one of the early Leafs out there, and it's still running. It's still going quite well for him. So these things last. And even when they do finish their life, they have a high degree of recyclability into them, including the battery packs and the components there. So there's a lot of recycling, and there are companies that are opening up. There's a company in Ontario that's already started. There are companies opening up globally to capture this marketplace as EVs start to hit the marketplace for end of life in the next few years and continuing onwards. So there's tons of science behind this. You can certainly Google and check it out. And I mentioned home charging as well, and the advantage is charging. Now, people may not think about this, because we're used to seeing gas stations on almost every corner where they've been around for a long time. But when you do some math and you kind of peel some of the layers back, these are some of the numbers that I was able to find. Now, I'm going to admit up here that a little bit of this is a guess, because it's really hard to find how many gas stations are in the world to get an accurate number. I was able to extrapolate this number based on some formulas that I came across and some estimates. So, the numbers may not be exact, but I think the takeaway on this slide is the difference in the ratios between this. And if you look at 2019, EVs are only about 3% of the autos on the road. Last year, there was about 80 million autos sold globally, and that's autos and light trucks. So that's SUVs and pickup trucks as well as cars. And that's both consumer and corporate type of vehicles. So 80 million, 3% of those, are about 2.3 something, 2.5 last year, were electric vehicles. And what I mean by electric vehicle is anything with a plug. So either a plug-in hybrid or all electric. So from an autos, that equates to about, right now, the number I could get was about 1.4 billion autos on the road, with about 175 million gas stations, or gas pumps even, because one station might have 6, 8, or 10 pumps, or even more. So when you look at those numbers, it equates to somewhere around 800 autos per available pump. But if we look at EVs, even with the amount of EVs that are on the road today over the last decade, and there's well over 800,000 now charging stations, not including the ability to home charge, that leaves a ratio of about 60 EVs per charging station. So there's less number of EVs fighting for that plug than there are cars fighting for the pump. I know that, when the gas price dumps 10 cents, there's lineups around the street for that in those days. So you don't really see that at charging stations. It maybe in a few cases in California or some really heavily transited areas, you see that. But with EVs becoming having more capable, longer ranges, the need to stop more often is a lot less. So you can see the ratio. And I guess the key here is that if you have the ability to also charge at home, then your home becomes your gas station. And I always like using that word, because I can't get fuel into my garage to put into my car, so that I don't have to go to a gas station, but I can plug it in, even to a 110-volt outlet. I don't have to spend hundreds of dollars, $1,000 or more, to get a level 2 charger put in my home. I can use a wall plug. It just depends on your daily uses. So you do need to look into that. So pretty interesting when you look at the stats. And, you know, this is kind of a bit of a closing slide, just talking how far we've progressed with electric vehicles over this decade. Wasn't that long ago where people were saying, you know, they're really just glorified golf carts and kind of a wasted space, and they're kind of a bad idea. Now we're seeing, you know, companies like GM say they're all in. Ford is all in. Ford is, of course, announced the Mach-E. They're going to electrify the F-150. All these companies are getting in. And Volkswagen, as I mentioned, has started. They've just converted their first major plant in Germany over from internal combustion vehicles to now producing only 100% electric vehicles. That's a monumental shift for Volkswagen, where this plant has been building cars for over 100 years for them. So that was quite the change, and that's going to just continue in the marketplace today. So quite a transformation. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation and learned a couple things, and I encourage you to join the revolution, take your time in looking at it. I wanted to talk briefly about EVS. We are a resource out there. We're a volunteer group, the Electric Vehicle Society of Canada. We're about 1,500 owners. Dave and I are a couple of members. Across Canada now, we are not-for-profit volunteer. We have lots of chapters all around the country, with tons of them in Ontario. Certainly, I believe the Barrie chapter. There might even be one between you, Dave, the Barrie, and another one that services Aurelia. Lots of places to go. And really what we do is we share the benefits and our experience of EV ownership with others so that they can see it firsthand how it is. We do meetings and a lot of public events and talks like this, things like that. And then also we have a lobby, you know, part to us. So we're involved with levels of government and lobbying for different things that affect, you know, greenhouse gas emissions to do with the automobile transportation sector. So it's not just about pushing EVs. We talk about electric buses, and we talk about other forms that we can help reduce our emissions. So pretty strong group and a bunch of great people. And as Dave mentioned, I do have a show on YouTube on my channel. It's called the EV Revolution Show. Easy to find. I have a Gmail address there, which you can, which I put at the end of each show as well, which you can reach out to me if you have any other questions or want information. Follow me on Twitter, and I do a bit on Instagram, but not a lot. There's too many things out there for me to have the time to deal with. But I try to educate. I've been doing it now for about 2.5 years, this show, but I was doing another show part of that for about a year as well. So I've been following this industry for almost 4 years. It's a very fascinating industry to follow and a lot of good stuff going on. So with that, that's a thank you. I'm going to go back to stop sharing the screen here, and I'm going to go back to looking at the questions and the poll, and I see we have quite a lot. So Dave, I guess I'll jump right into the questions, or do you have anything to add before I do that? Just don't forget to unmute yourself, Dave.
Oh.
There you go.
I did, yeah. I'm going to say, do you prefer that I read you the questions and then you answer them?
You know, I can do the whole thing. It's probably easier if I do it. So
okay, it's
you?
your show.
Oh, good. So,
okay,
so
go
I
ahead.
tried to answer one there. So I have a question from Jim. Is insurance more for EV? So again, as I mentioned on the slide, generally it's less, but again, insurance is very dependent on where you live, your record, your age, all these other factors that they bring in, environmental as well. But typically, when I got the Leaf, which was a brand new vehicle, I moved from a used vehicle, and my rate stayed the same. And I didn't move, I didn't change. My ratings didn't change because, you know, I'm at the age group where I'm already up over that rating group. So it stayed the same. So to me, that was because of the safety ratings and the less costly they are to fix. Jim also asked about winter range and limited charging stations are disincentives. Well, it could be, Jim, but again, what I tell people that are interested in looking at EVs is, what's your daily range? You know, the average stat in North America is about, you know, 20 to 30 miles. So let's say 40 to 50 kilometers, 40 to 60 kilometers a day for daily trip. Now, if you're doing 200 a day, it is feasible in an EV, but you have to look at an EV with a bigger battery. So it really depends. There's also plug-in hybrids, as I mentioned. There's a lot of good options out there. There are some plug-in hybrids that have good size battery packs. So if you're concerned about the environment and lowering your greenhouse gas emissions, because the transportation sector, especially the consumer transportation sector, is a large contributor to greenhouse gas emissions globally. So it's a great area that we as individual people have some level of control on how we help with that. So winter range, as I mentioned, you can go up to 50% loss. So again, you have to factor all these things on. When I first got my Leaf, my first winter, I was a little apprehensive. Okay, how far can I go? I'd have to look at it, have to watch it, monitor it. But then you get used to how to drive it a little bit better. You can preheat these vehicles in your garage or plug them in outside or inside. Start the heater up. Again, they're not emitting any emissions, so you can run the heater for an hour or so before you go. You're just pulling, if it's plugged in, you're pulling it off your house electricity, so you're not wearing the battery, but the car's already warm. The majority of power in the winter comes from the heating of the vehicle. That's where you get a lot of loss. So there are different kinds of tips and tricks that you can do to offset that. So it still can be very feasible. And charging stations, there are so many charging stations coming up now. I don't have the plug share slide up, Dave. Maybe I'll bring that up at the end. I forgot to load that up, but you could look on the website. It's called Plug Share, and you'll see all the indications of charging stations. These are level 2, level 3. These are public. Some are private. You can filter it by vehicle, by type, all this kind of stuff. I didn't get into the technology of charging today. I didn't want to inundate you folks with all this information, but just relatively remember that if you can plug your iPhone in at night, or your cell phone, you can plug your car in, even if it's a 110. So it can work. I have an uncle who lives in a condo, and because he doesn't drive a whole lot, he's only driving maybe 100 kilometers a week, just around town. He's a senior, retired. He's able to just plug his vehicle in his underground parking lot. There's a 110 plug next to his spot. He can plug it in and charge, and it works fine for him. So it can be done. Do I expect prices to come down? I think I've answered that, Roger. Thanks for the question, and thanks, Jim, for your questions. Again, we're still waiting for cost parity. We've seen battery prices come down. Tesla continues to push the envelope. They've talked about a $25,000 car in the next 2 years that they'll come out with. So that could be another game-changing event if that happens. I'd like to see EVs come down to that $25,000 price range, because I think that would really open it up to the majority of buyers out there. Because again, of the savings that you'll have over the life of the vehicle, it really is a powerful argument. So I don't know. We'll have to wait and see, Roger. But I expect it'll be a little longer than the next 2 years. I expect probably closer to 4 to 5 years right now. And will the Ontario government be forced to put a rebate plan back? In my personal opinion, and I have no knowledge on this, Roger, it's very doubtful. If you've watched the news today, we're into record deficits now for the Ontario government. That we're in the hole more than we've ever been. I doubt that the government's going to look at putting something like this in place in the foreseeable future, because they've got bigger fish to fry. Yes, the environment's important. I get it. I know it. I live it. However, I don't think that that's going to happen. It would be a nice surprise, but I haven't heard any scuttlebutt about that, so we'll have to wait and see. Has anyone tested the battery emissions within the cabs of EVs? There is some science on that, Jim. Thanks for the question. I know what you're talking about, like electromagnetic and that kind of stuff. I don't think there's enough concrete science on that. There is some shielding that's done from the batteries. They're in pouches and they're in cylindrical. There's different kinds of designs. So there is some shielding that's done to limit the amount of exposure. So there is no hard science. There is no data supporting that there's any negative impacts right now. But again, it is a young industry as well. It's only really got its stride now in the last couple of years. It's been around commercially for about 10 years, as I mentioned. So there's not a lot of data out. You can research that, and you might find some studies that have been done, but I think it's still very much inconclusive. And because of the engineering aspects going on, I don't know if it's any consideration. I know if you sit in the back seat or sit in your car, your phone's not going wonky, your GPS is working, any type of devices you take into there work. So I don't, if there is any electromagnetism or anything like that that could be considered dangerous, it's probably very low. And even over an amount of long period of time is probably not enough to cause any worry. But I'm not a doctor or a scientist in that area, so I would caution you to go and dig for that research if you can find some. Thanks, Marilyn, for the question. Are there any EVs or hybrid plugins, which can be pull a small trailer. Absolutely. Yeah, you have to check the manufacturers. But there are, I mean, I know people with a Leaf that pull a trailer. I know people with Model 3s that are pulling trailer. So, you know, some of them may not, the manufacturers may say you really shouldn't, but it can be done. You do need to check and research on that. Certainly when you get into some of the larger EVs like the Model X, the Audi e-tron, some of the SUVs, they can pull decent sized trailers. It's not a problem. There are weights, and there are going to be more stuff coming. I haven't even really talked about the pickup trucks and the other rest of the SUV market that'll be coming over the next couple of years with a flood of things like Rivian and F1 Ford's F-150s. GMC's going to announce the Hummer during the first game of the World Series coming up on the 20th. They're going to do a big ad pitch to roll out the new all electrified Hummer. That's pretty ironic, but it's interesting to see how the times have changed. So there are going to be even much more choice for something like that. Great question. So thanks for that. Can you get the mini and stick shift? No. EVs, unfortunately, and I love stick shift, don't get me wrong, I grew up on that, so I do miss it. But EVs have a very simplified transmission. They may look like, you know, like in the VW, it looks like your regular automatic transmission, but it really only has one gear, just one long gear that goes. It's a forward or reverse. The electric motor turns in one direction when it's going forward. It turns in the other direction when it's going in reverse, and it's mated to the axle. So that's really where you get your power from. These are mated together in those systems, whether it's front wheel, rear wheel, or all-wheel drive. The motors are mated. So that's how they work. So they're very simplified. It's either, you know, forward or reverse. So no stick shift, but that would be fun. I think some EVs give you the perception that they're shifting. They program these little pauses or something to give you that sense that you're in an automatic shifter, but there is no manual mechanism for that. So thanks, Jay, for that as well. I'm not sure about the Mach-E. I think, again, it's going to be kind of a faux shifting experience, but I could be wrong. They may put in something like a Tiptronic type of approach where you can force some of the gears. They might put some multiple gears into there. I don't know why, because EVs, again, the motors can give you that torque right away. You step on the accelerator, you get all that foot-pounds of torque instantly. There's no spinning up. You have to wait a few seconds. There's no turbo lag or anything like that. You get it. So I don't see the need for a transmission in that because of the way EVs operate. But they might do some sort of faux transmission shifting element, maybe a noise or a sound or some feeling in the vehicles. I haven't seen the Mustang Mach-E yet, so I don't know. Will the presentation be available later for review? I could make this available to Sustainable Aurelia. I'll work with Dave on that and see what we can do for you. Appreciate the ask, Linda. Charging on the road is still an issue for us, okay, excluding Teslas. I get you. And then we've been out of internet range. PlugShare doesn't work. Any tips? Thanks, Gordon, for that. You know, all I can say is that there are more EV charging stations opening up. Ivy is a provincial one that they've started in conjunction with OPG. Petro-Canada has rolled out their coast-to-coast network. There's also Electrified Canada as well, and then there's Flow, ChargePoint, a whole bunch of others that are out there. I know in some areas of Ontario, especially when you get out of the major GTA and the major regions, it gets a little more barren. There are more coming. eCamion's another one that's going to come out with product next year. I can't tell you when. As far as tips goes, you know, I'm not sure what to do. What I would do is route plan. That's probably the best thing. If that's a challenge for you, is do some route planning before you leave so you can know where charging stations are. Tesla's been pretty good at rolling out their own network. You know, they kind of, if you build it, we will come. So they took that approach. They built the charging infrastructure to support their cars as they built more, and it's really paid off for them. So we are going to be seeing more, though, in Ontario for other people. Let me just see, is Ford Canada planning a network of level 3? They are partnering with some of the vendors in giving some funding. So you may see some Ford names on some of the vendors that are out there. I believe they're going to outfit their dealerships with some level 2s and possibly some level 3s as they get there. You'll have to check on their website. They're not, the automakers in general aren't interested in building supercharging or fast charging networks like Tesla. Tesla was a bit of an anomaly because they had this great idea, this great product, but it was very expensive back 10 years ago, and there weren't really hardly any charging stations. I'm sure Dave can attest to that when he got his Leaf. So Tesla said, we're going to build charging stations as fast as we can and so we can support the car. So they took a different approach. But again, all Tesla does is battery only vehicles. That's it. They have other divisions, they have other entities within Elon Musk empire, all this kind of stuff. But as far as the core elements of Tesla, they build electric cars. So that's all they have to focus on. Whereas Ford, GM, Chrysler, everybody else builds a myriad of internal combustion products and a very small amount of electric vehicles. Again, it's only about 3% of the marketplace today. So it doesn't make business sense for the OEMs to build their own charging networks. They will leverage what's out there and they'll partner. So Ford is offering, I think, 2 or 3 years of free charging on the Mustang or whatever on some of the Lincolns and stuff, the plugins, if in conjunction with whoever's out there. So that's probably what'll happen. But thanks for that question. What is the average lifespan? That's a great question, David. We haven't really hit it yet. I mean, there are vehicles that are going 10 years. I mean, I just read an article today about a guy who's got a 2012 Tesla Model S, as in Sam. It's not been 10 years, but he's got the Guinness Book of World Record for the longest distance in an all-electric vehicle, 1.7 million kilometers, over 700,000 miles. This gentleman, I believe, is in Norway or one of the Scandinavian countries, and he drives all over the place. So do they last? Yes, they last. And that's because there's less parts, there's less wear and tear. The biggest thing I think that we get here in Canada is the salt and the potential erosion for the bodies of the vehicles, more so than the mechanics. Of course, some of the suspension and things like that can get dirty and can wear up, but they can be fixed. So the answer, David, is we really don't know yet, but it's not uncommon to see EVs that'll go for 10 years. And the average car now that's built is pretty good quality, and they should be going for 5 to 10 years as well. So EVs should equal or surpass that. Is it best to buy new? Jim, well, kind of in conjunction with David's other question about what to look for in a used EV, new or used, they're great alternatives. It really depends on your budget, on what your needs are. Though, if you can buy new, great, but there are great used EVs out there. What to look for, really, other than your normal wear and tear items that you would look for, is the state of health of the battery. And the best person to give you that information is the manufacturer of the vehicle. I wouldn't go to any third-party garage to get that information. I would always take it to, let's say if it's a used Nissan Leaf, I would take it to a Nissan Leaf dealer, because not all Nissan dealers deal with the Leaf products. They have to be certified, have the equipment and the knowledge. Take it to them, let them check the battery and give you a report and tell you what the state of the battery is. That's the number one thing you really want to look at in a used EV is what's the state of the battery, so that you can understand how healthy it is, how much charge it holds, can still hold, and equals how much range you can get out of it. So that's what you want to really look for in that. Any federal rebate for used? No, there is no federal rebate, Roger, for used EVs. Plug-in Drive, which is an organization in Toronto. You Google their website. They are offering an incentive for used EVs, I believe $1,000 through a private benefactor. They have this fund that's been set up. You have to work with them to get it. They offer that, also a scrap it program. So I think if you're going to trade in an older internal combustion vehicle, you can get another $1,000 back from them. So you can get 2,000 on a used EV. I would check them out. You have to sit through a 1 hour kind of lecture or a course from them, and they tell you about how to look for, how to shop, and what to look for in used EVs. A lot more detail than what I'm providing here today. But there is no federal. Some of the other provinces have used program rebates as well for used EVs, but in Ontario we don't. We just have the private program. You see Tesla's, another question from Roger on Auto Trader with 5,000 for sale. Why would someone order 8 weeks and then sell it? Well, I'd be a little skeptical. There are a lot of scams that are out there, Roger. I've been keeping a little bit of an eye. I have some friends at Auto Trader that I report people to. You get a lot of these places that say they have this, low mileage vehicle, but it ends up being, an impound lot in Florida or in Texas or something like that. And then a lot of these are scammers. So be very careful when you see that. If you are looking at vehicles on Auto Trader, I would stick with in country first of all, and make sure it's something that you can go visibly see. If it's the old adage, if a deal sounds too good to be true, then it is. It's not true. So take that as some advice. And do batteries need replacing? If so, how often and how much? Well, Linda, in most cases they don't. That's a great question. All manufacturers now offer an 8-year or 160,000 kilometer warranty on the battery and the drive system components. So they should not. What that means is that if they fall below a certain level of charge or state of health within that 8 years, they will fix the battery, bring it up to what it should be above that level within those years. It can be expensive, but again, it's a very young industry right now. It's only 5 to 10 years old in any sense of any capacity. So we're not seeing a lot of repairs having to be done yet. So there's not a lot of data to support that. It can be expensive. I know Nissan was offering battery swap outs for about $8,000 to $12,000. That's a lot of money. But again, it's not a lot of money if you think of basically you're going to have pretty well a brand new car for another 10 years for $12,000. Because again, the cars run really well. There's not a lot of stuff to break on them. So that industry is still evolving. And that the price points are coming down. There are third-party companies opening up that will retrofit as well cars and fix batteries. So you do have to look around. Not a lot yet in Canada, but more of that is coming. And then thanks Dave for putting out the plug and drive link there. So I believe that I've got all the questions. I see that 11 people answered the poll, that nobody has an EV. So hopefully this brought some knowledge, made you maybe think a little bit on how an EV could work for you in your lifestyle. And I wanted to mention the handout there that I uploaded. It's a handout that I got from a publication in the US. So the pricing is all US numbers, so you can ignore that. But the good data you can take away is it's a nice visual element to show you kind of what the average range of a whole bunch of different kind of EVs are. And so I thought I like it as a little bit of a cheat sheet document. So hopefully that helps. And there, I'll turn it back to you, Dave.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Ken. I hope I'm coming through. In that case, a few things. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, well, thank you very much for that presentation. We had a lot of questions that you've managed to get through. If anyone else has a question that you think of afterwards, you can contact me through Sustainable Aurelia. I'll put my email address in the chat for you, and you can email me your question and I'll pass it on, or we'll find an answer for you. I've got one more poll to try here. If we can just do this. Again, bear with me. This is new technology for us. And I'm not sure. Did it pop up here? I'm supposed to share now. Okay. So if the people in the audience can answer those questions, and we'll see where we stand, because we kind of like to believe that we're actually turning the tide of people's purchases towards going electric, and it kind of gives us a sense that we're doing a good job, or maybe not doing a good job. So, and while you're doing that, don't forget to try visiting Ken Bokor's YouTube channel. I'm not sure how many episodes you're up to now, Ken, but the last time I saw it was like 100 plus. How many?
I'm up there.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, well, there's 109 episodes, and you'll be able to find all sorts of things like evaluations of certain cars and certain models, and they're very interesting to go through, especially if you're thinking of purchasing one. And it's pretty hard to get out to all the dealers to find out what's out there, because in a lot of cases the dealers don't carry these things, and you have to order them. Right. So you have to do your homework, Dave, first.
That's a great point. Wanted to mention that I'm also one of the few EV only people that is accredited media. So I am part of the Automobile Journalists Association of Canada, HYUNDAI. And what that does is it gets me into press fleets of vehicles, so that I do get access from time to time for EVs that I can test drive. So you're absolutely right. I've got a bunch of review, and you can sort it and look by it, different categories on the channel if you're interested. And I do try to relate these reviews to real life driving situations and to real what matters for people day by day. So I just see Roger's got one more question, which I thought I'd get. He said, if money was no object, your recommendation on a budget. If money was no object, Roger, I still think Tesla has the best battery management systems today and the best battery technology. Again, they've been able to hone this over 10 years plus of building vehicles. That's all they do, and they do it really well. You know, I mentioned that Model S got 1.7 million kilometers, still original battery pack. There's a taxi service in the US that goes from Vegas to California to LA and back using Model S's. Over 500,000 miles in a year or 2 years, and they're going strong with these things. The only thing they go they eat up is tires because they're fast and heavy. So if money was no object, that would be kind of still the best. They are the leader in the industry when it comes to that. Their QC on some of the Model 3s and Model Ys are a little bit suspect, but they are a company that stands behind their product. But I'm not a Tesla fanboy kind of person. I'm very much a realist. I had a Leaf for 2 years, which was great, worked great. I just needed something with more range and had the ability to get into a Model 3, which was something I've always looked at for many years. So a Tesla product would be it, but there are others now. Audi's product is really good, very solid. I mean, all the manufacturers now build pretty solid products. Even Dave, you know, you've got an older Leaf, runs great for you.
Oh yes, it's a 2012. I love to tell people it's 8 years old because most of the time they can't believe it. It looks really good, and it's still in excellent shape. And you know, one thing about battery degradation, I've had some, but it doesn't impact the usefulness of the car at all after 8 years. So, and I'm going to drive it until it no longer serves as a need. So I might end up having it for another 10 years. Who knows? Um, I'm looking at the results of the questionnaire we just put out, and 67% said yes, more likely to purchase an electric vehicle. 25% said still debating about it, which is fine. Only 8% said not likely. So we have some work to do. We still have some convincing.
I wanted to add again, you know, my approach is a realist approach. And I know that EVs aren't for everybody. They don't fit everybody's use case today. And I get it. I understand that. I know that. And the good thing that I can say is that the industry is alive, and it's going to get better. This is going to be a phenomenal decade of innovation and more choice, and that's what we'll need. You'll see pickup trucks, you'll see big SUVs, you'll see all kinds of other vehicles coming out fully electrified that will probably, you know, be able to satisfy everybody's needs from a daily use perspective. And hopefully, you know, in 10 years or less, we won't get any more not likelies, because there is that. But I do understand prices will come down, there'll be more choice.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And one last thing, we kind of have a sense of how long an EV can last because I recently hosted a webinar for one of our sister organizations in the States, and the topic was a 1912 Detroit Electric that was still running, you know, after how many years now? You know, 70, 80 years. And it was, yeah. And so they've been around for a long time. Yes. But anyway, at this point, I think we're going to conclude this webinar. And just hold on one second. I'm just going to put my email address in the chat so that if anybody does have a question, okay, there it is. Give you a few minutes to digest that. And like I said, we're willing to pass the questions on. And thank you very much, Ken, for participating in this webinar. We really appreciate it. And hopefully we have happy motoring in the future. You're welcome. Okay, and thank everybody out there that joined us tonight, because you know, without viewers, we wouldn't have an audience, and you know, one thing leads to another. So thank you very much for attending, and I hope that everybody enjoyed this one. And don't forget to check out our other ones by going to the Sustainable Really website and check out the other webinars in this series. Thank you, and have a good night.